Hi there. Tonight, let's begin with something deeply human, sleep, or more curiously, how people in the Middle Ages drifted off. It turns out, their sleep routines were stranger than you'd expect. But before we dive in, take a moment to settle in, and maybe like or subscribe, only if this space truly brings you peace. Leave a comment below with your location and the time you're listening. It's always lovely to see where night is unfolding across the world. Now, dim the lights. Turn on a fan if you like, a gentle background hum. Let's ease into tonight's journey together. Long before electricity and modern sleep advice, medieval folks had nighttime habits that would confuse today's sleep experts. They followed a pattern called segmented sleep. Two distinct phases, divided neatly like pages in an old book. After sunset, people entered first, sleep, quiet, restorative, and deep. Then, about 4 hours later, they woke deliberately. No panic, no insomnia, just a normal, gentle pause. In that space between sleeps, they moved slowly, lighting fires, whispering prayers, checking the animals outside. It was quiet, intentional, their version of midnight multitasking. No one saw it as strange. It was simply part of the night's rhythm. The watch period wasn't wasted time. It was sacred, useful, and surprisingly social. They talked softly, read scriptures, or simply sat together in silence. The night held space for more than sleep. Some even found this the perfect time for intimacy. Peaceful bodies, quiet minds. Medieval physicians agreed. The soul was calm, the body rested, a gentle moment of closeness, free from arguments. So if you've ever thought you were romantic for making coffee at dawn, just know your ancestors were setting the bar centuries ago. From monks to farmers, everyone followed this quiet rhythm. Even Chaucer mentioned it, proof that fragmented sleep shaped life and literature alike. Yes, even in medieval stories, people weren't sleeping straight through the night. Strangely, science today suggests this two-part sleep may be more natural, aligned with how our bodies respond in true darkness. So next time you're wide awake at 2 a.m., don't worry. Just whisper, "Ah yes, the watch has begun." Maybe light a symbolic fire within. It was only with factories, gas lamps, and productivity demands that the idea of 8 perfect hours was born. In the medieval world, waking at midnight wasn't failure. It was simply the way things were. Now, let's talk about beds, or the medieval version of them. Today, we crave clouds and cooling foam. But back then, a bed was mostly things that used to be alive, laid flat by time and exhaustion. Most peasants slept on straw known as a pallet, sometimes in a rough sack, sometimes just straw on the damp floor, possibly with a cat already claiming it. It wasn't comfortable, but it was something, and something was better than nothing. Straw was cheap, warm, and excellent at hiding lice and mice. Still, they rested carefully, quietly. If it itched, they ignored it. If it bit, they rolled over and hoped. Those with means might lift their straw mattress onto a wooden frame, a small luxury in a world of cold stone and whispered dreams. Beds didn't guarantee comfort, but they did make beetles in your ears less likely. Slightly. Linens were rare. Most slept in the same clothes they wore all day. Pajamas didn't exist, and neither did privacy. Entire families, parents, children, sometimes a grandparent shared one sleeping space, often huddled on straw. If you got too warm, you simply rolled into your cousin's elbow. Nobles were luckier. They had tall beds, feather mattresses, and embroidered sheets, all beneath heavy canopies to block drafts, and hopefully, lice. These beds were so prized, they were passed down in wills. You didn't inherit land, you inherited Aunt Matilda's suspiciously lumpy feather bed. For most medieval folks, a bed wasn't luxury, it was survival. A space not to freeze, not to be pecked by chickens, and maybe, just maybe, a place to dream of one day sleeping on something that didn't rustle or squawk. Today, a nightcap evokes warmth, a soft drink, a glowing hearth, and perhaps a touch of whiskey. Back then, a nightcap wasn't a drink, it was a hat, a real one. Often warm, sometimes silly looking, always practical. Its job, keeping your head from freezing while you slept. Medieval homes weren't built for warmth. Stone walls, drafty roofs, and windows made from horn or parchment let the cold seep in. Central heating. That was a loyal dog curled by your feet. Since heat escapes quickest through the scalp, people wore nightcaps to bed, soft, simple, and stitched from whatever warmth they could find. Wool, linen, scraps spared from the family stash or the family goat. The most iconic style, long and pointy. Think sleepy wizard meets medieval chimney sweep. For men, it was pure function. For women, it often doubled as a head wrap, cozy and modest in one. Modesty mattered. Many women wore nightcaps to cover their hair, especially when soap hadn't made an appearance since Lent. But beyond warmth, these caps held meaning. In some regions, married women had to keep their heads covered, even while sleeping. Caps were often embroidered or dyed, quiet signals of wealth, status, or family pride. Because nothing says prestige like a miniature flag stitched to your forehead. In towns and cities, wearing a nightcap became a polite way to say, "I'm off duty." If you answered the door with one, conversation was discouraged. Yes, this hat was basically medieval for do not disturb. Nightcaps were usually paired with loose nightshirts, long tunics, not particularly fashionable. Think Scrooge's sleepwear, minus the ghostly trauma. It wasn't sexy, it was scratchy, sometimes flammable, but it got the job done. Today, sleeping near strangers happens on red-eye flights or bizarre Airbnb mix-ups. But in medieval Europe, sharing a bed with others, family, servants, maybe the occasional chicken was completely normal. It was completely normal, and not optional. If you were a merchant, a pilgrim, or just someone whose mule gave up on the road, you found an inn. A rare luxury, but not quite what you hoped. You didn't get a room, or a bed. Sometimes not even a clean patch of floor. What you got was a place inside a bed already occupied. Medieval inns were bunkhouses, not private havens. Sharing was the rule, not the exception. If space existed, you filled it with strangers who snored, mumbled, or carried far too many boils. It wasn't rude, it was resourceful. Beds might hold 2, 3, even 4 travelers. If the mattress fit, so did you. In big cities, you'd land in a dorm-style hall. Rows of beds, no personal space. Snoring contests were free, elbow wars, frequent privacy. Just a dream. Sometimes men and women were separated, but not always. Some inns matched beds by trade blacksmiths with blacksmiths, clergy with clergy, thieves with other thieves in theory. It was first come, first curled up. Sharing beds with strangers might sound wild today, but back then it was better than wolves in rain. Thieves roamed, so travelers slept with purses tied to belts or hidden under clothes. Many turned luggage into pillows and alarms if it moved. They probably lost something. Nobles avoided all this. They traveled with entourages or demanded private rooms, especially if innkeepers liked having roofs. Going to bed wasn't just rest, it was a spiritual event. Sleep came with the fear of death, or eternal judgment. Nightfall called for confessions, psalms, final prayers. Forget lavender spray or cozy podcasts. Medieval sleepers closed their eyes knowing they might not wake. Prayers were offered at bedtime, just in case sleep turned into something final. Death could come by illness, fire, demons, or the terrible fate of being over 30 in 1247. So they prayed, not for comfort, but out of fear. Hell was real, and you didn't want to arrive unwashed and spiritually messy. That famous line, "If I should die before I wake," sounds sweet, but it's really a bedtime disclaimer from a 7-year-old facing eternity. Adults had prayers for everything: guilt, demons in the rafters, even plague prevention, though that one didn't age well. Some called on saints who guarded sleepers, like holy bouncers watching the soul's doorway. The devout ended each night with Compline, the final prayer service. And after that, silence, which wasn't difficult, since most were already tired, hungry, and just a little scared of the dark. Children prayed too, partly for their souls, partly to stop wondering why the dog was in their bed again. Parents said angels were watching. Sweet, yes, but it felt more like divine surveillance than comfort. So in truth, bedtime prayer was less about peace, and more like medieval antivirus. You didn't know how it worked, just hoped it did. Today, we dismiss dreams as randomness, stress, cheese, or scattered thoughts. But in the medieval world, dreams held weight, and sometimes, eternal consequences. In medieval times, dreams weren't random. They were messages from God, saints, angels, or something darker. Even a strange relic kiss could trigger a vision, divine revelations, or demonic temptations you were expected to notice. Some wrote them down, some confessed them, some fasted for days, just to be safe. Monks, mystics, and dream interpreters spent lifetimes decoding their meaning. Books were written, symbols studied. Fire meant hell, water could cleanse or drown, and if you dreamt of a goat-headed man juggling fish, well, time to call the priest and maybe change villages. Dreams mattered because your soul was still awake while your body slept. That small dream of stealing bread might be gluttony, or just hunger. Still, better to confess. Monks recorded their dreams. Some were praised, others just told to eat fewer onions before bed. Yet dreams weren't only spiritual puzzles. They were storytelling fuel. Medieval tales were full of dream visions, knights meeting angels, demons, and strange poetic creatures. They were like Netflix, but with more metaphor and fewer happy endings. Of course, the church was cautious. Not all dreams came from heaven. Some were traps planted by demons to lure the soul away. A troubling dream might mean your spirit was under attack, or just that the fire smoked a little too much. Today we let pets sleep beside us, cozy, warm, and occasionally smelly, but still a comfort. In medieval times, sharing your bed with animals wasn't quirky, it was a survival tactic. Homes were cold, drafty, and built more for endurance than comfort. No insulation, stone walls, roofs that whispered to the wind. Central heating, that was the family pig. Peasants often slept beside animals, dogs, chickens, pigs, all gathered near the hearth or nestled into the straw. Not for love, but for warmth. Animals radiated heat, and unlike relatives, it didn't steal your blanket. A dog kept your toes warm. A cow raised the temperature slightly, a miracle in deep winter. Most households shared one room, sleeping, eating, living, even dying. Children curled between parents and goats. Chickens doubled as alarm clocks. Hygiene, let's not ask. Wealthier families avoided livestock in bed, though lapdogs were common for status and shared fleas. Some castles gave pets their own rooms, because nothing says noble like a dog with a title. Sure, animals snored, wandered, bit, but people adapted. A hoof to the face at 3 a.m., just part of the nightly routine. And if you've ever stayed in a noisy hostel, meet the medieval monastery, a place where comfort went to die under a vow of silence. Monks didn't believe in personal space, privacy, softness, comfort. None of that existed here. Medieval dormitories housed rows of monks, laid out like quiet, upright souls. Beds were just wooden planks. If the abbot felt generous, maybe a thin straw mat, especially on feast days. Monks slept fully clothed, not for modesty, but to avoid fumbling in the cold darkness at 2 a.m. Robes, belts, sandals, doubled as spiritual armor and poor insulation. Too cold, layer up. Too hot, that wasn't really an option. No pillows, no curtains, no conversation. Silence wasn't suggested, it was sacred, enforced by the rule of Saint Benedict. Groan too loudly, and you'd earn a week of chamber pot duty. Snoring was tolerated, sometimes, but if it disturbed others, let's just say God wasn't the only judge. The room glowed with a single candle. You didn't need to see, just to lie still and stay pure. Monks believed these Spartan beds prepared the soul for eternity. Sleep wasn't indulgent, it was disciplined. Some even slept, sitting upright, just to reject comfort, dreams, and blood circulation. Suddenly, a peasant's straw pile beside a snoring pig sounds almost luxurious. At least the pig didn't judge you. Now, let's talk about something modern sleepers might dread. Waking up at 2 a.m. not to scroll or sip water, but for prayer. Cold, dark, candlelit prayer. In monasteries, this wasn't strange, it was sacred routine. Monks and nuns followed a strict schedule called the canonical hours, and at its quiet center, matins, the first service of the day. And by day, we mean deep night, the hour when owls still debated waking. A bell rang, often by someone unfortunate enough to be chosen. Then, in silence, a procession of sleep-deprived monks shuffled to the chapel, still robed, still fully dressed. Pajamas weren't part of the doctrine, they're only layers, spiritual ones. Under candlelight and high stone arches, they chanted psalms and whispered scripture, fighting the urge to drift off. Falling asleep was common, and punishable, usually with more prayers or extra chores. Doze off during matins, you might find yourself leading the next one. Services lasted an hour, sometimes 2. Staying spiritually alert while your stomach echoed yesterday's lentils. Not easy. After prayer, monks returned for second sleep, or dove straight into labor, threshing wheat after 4 fragmented hours. Holy discipline. The idea was simple. Sacrifice comfort, give the quietest part of night to God, before warmth or dreams could distract. Once you accepted numb feet, candle smoke, and Brother Ambrose's off-key chanting, it became devotion. Today, sleeping alone feels luxurious, a sign of peace and personal space. But in medieval times, solitude in sleep was strange, impractical, even unsafe. Warmth mattered most, and beds, as you've seen, weren't generous. Stone walls and open chimneys did little to hold heat, and central heating, still several plagues away, so people shared beds, not for love, but for warmth. It was thermal teamwork, nothing more. Children slept beside siblings, parents, and visiting neighbors. It felt like a sleepover, without an invitation. Beyond warmth, group sleep had a spiritual purpose. Night was believed to be the devil's playground. Alone in the dark, your soul might be at risk. Temptation, or possession. Others nearby formed a moral shield, someone to witness, someone to intervene. For children, sleeping alone was unthinkable. Not just for comfort, but to keep ghosts and fairies at bay. Bedtime tales didn't end in hugs. They ended in caution or disappearance. Even married couples often shared beds with kids, servants, or random guests. Privacy, that was a myth we invented later. Two people alone in a giant bed, wasteful or suspicious. In monasteries, monks slept communally. Solitary sleep was sometimes a punishment, because where one sleeps alone, temptation might creep in. Group sleep kept the soul in check. So next time you're tucked in with silence and your own blanket, remember, you'd likely have a sheepdog, 2 kids, and a cousin snoring beside you. If you've ever nodded off in a lecture, a train, or a waiting room, you probably woke with regret and a sore neck. But in the Middle Ages, sleeping upright wasn't accidental, it was intentional. Wealthy folks, pious monks, some chose to sleep propped up, not for comfort, but for conviction. Why sleep upright? A few reasons, none of them restful. Medically, lying flat was thought to harm digestion, disrupt the lungs, or imbalance your inner humors. In a world where sneezing could realign your soul, that logic held. Sleeping upright, they believed, kept the brain clear, avoiding congestion and phlegm-related doom. Then came the spiritual fears. Lying flat looked too much like death. Best not confuse the angels or invite an early exit. Yes, superstitious. But when your priest doubled as your doctor, you didn't argue. So people slept propped up with pillows, bolsters, or wooden supports. Their version of a medieval recliner. Nobles had angled beds for digesting meat pies or dodging demons. Monks, they sat upright on benches, pressed to cold walls. It wasn't comfort, it was discipline, because comfort led to dreams, and dreams might lead to sin. Next stop, 5 a.m. confession. So no, this wasn't restful sleep. It was virtue, layered in discomfort and tangled theology. Forget ghosts under the bed. The real monsters, already in the sheets, tiny, relentless, immune to prayer. Fleas, lice, and the unofficial medieval mascot, the bedbug. Let's be honest, hygiene wasn't their strength. Baths were rare, laundry was pricey, soap, questionable at best. Add straw beds, shared linens, and the odd chicken wandering through, and you've got the perfect medieval sleep ecosystem. Medieval beds weren't just places to sleep, they were pest buffets. Fleas and lice were so common, they felt like roommates. Peasants faced them daily. Nobles, despite satin sheets, weren't spared. Some wealthy households even hired nitpickers, servants whose job was to remove lice. Yes, that was a real title. Master of the royal scalp. Bedbugs were the stealthier threat. Tiny nocturnal vampires, hiding in wood frames and stone cracks, waiting for nightfall. And that's why many slept fully clothed, not just for warmth, but defense. Nightcaps, pest armor. Solutions varied wildly, from herbs like wormwood, to garlic, onions, or ashes tucked into the bed. Romantic? Not exactly. Fleas weren't just itchy, they were symbolic. Reminders of sin, impurity, and poor decisions in bedding. Yes, people even wrote poetry about fleas, some moral, some oddly romantic. Let us be united like the flea that bites us both. Modern sleep battles blue light and buzzing phones. Medieval sleep, scratchy, twitchy, crawling, because something really was on your shin. And if you think that's uncomfortable, imagine sleeping in a suit of armor. 193, 0 hours 29 minutes and 6 seconds, 0, 0.29 to 13,000. Some folks actually did, because apparently, nothing says sweet dreams like preparing to joust in your sleep. To be fair, even knights didn't do it often. Armor was hot, heavy, and exceptionally loud. Wearing mail to bed, like napping inside a sack of silverware. But in wartime, comfort bowed to survival. A knight on campaign might remove just his helmet and gloves, keeping the breastplate on, just in case the enemy planned a midnight surprise. Few things are worse than waking to hooves and panic while dreaming about turnips. Men-at-arms often slept with their swords beside them, weapons as bedtime companions. Shields became pillows. If battle came, you'd already be dressed. Sleeping in armor wasn't restful. Iron didn't breathe, chainmail pinched, stone floors, faint torch crackles, snoring soldiers, somewhere below airport carpet on the comfort scale. Even those outside combat zones slept cautiously. Merchants, guards, they wore quilted gambesons, protection stitched into sleep. A bit warmer than prayer, a lot louder than peace, and armor wasn't subtle. One wrong roll, and you'd clank loud enough to summon Judgment Day. In a world of nightly demons, lice, and livestock in bed, sleepwalking might seem minor, but in medieval minds, it was theatrical. Sleepwalking meant you were bewitched, possessed, or unfinished business with the Holy Roman Empire. They didn't call it stress, they called it noctambullation, a word fancy enough to raise concern and maybe an exorcist. Sleepwalking was deeply feared and poorly understood. Rising from straw, wandering in silence. It wasn't quirky, it was terrifying. A blank stare at a wall felt more like the devil's rehearsal dinner than a harmless habit. People were genuinely spooked. Picture it, a man in a nightshirt, candle flickering, eyes glazed, mumbling Latin he didn't know, stepping over livestock, ghost, heretic, maybe both, and depending on the priest, an exorcism might be scheduled before breakfast. Some blamed black bile, the catch-all for unexplained behavior. Others believed sleep set the soul free, leaving the body to wander like a dazed mule. To prevent these midnight journeys, they tried prayers, iron charms, or simply tied the sleeper's leg to a chair. Extreme. Consider homes with open fires, stray knives, and chamber pots waiting to spill. In a strange twist, rumors told of sleepwalkers on rooftops. True or not, it led to barred windows and debates on whether sin could happen during unconscious wandering. Thankfully, most just paced, muttered, or tried to open doors that weren't there. But if someone wandered into a church, locals might declare it divine or call for cleansing just in case. Medieval life taught people one thing: sleep through chaos. Bells, storms, screaming goats, even sieges, all part of the bedtime soundtrack. The medieval version of white noise. Let's begin with the bells. They marked every sacred. Church bells rang for everything: sunrise, prayer, meals, and yes, the haunting 2 a.m. matins. If you lived near a monastery, your dreams came with a soundtrack. Eventually, the mind gave in. Bells became lullabies for souls worn down by devotion and routine. But it wasn't just bells. Storms rolled in without warning, loud, unruly, and terrifying. No weather apps, no insulation. Thunder felt personal. Roofs leaked, windows trembled, chimneys wailed like spirits. Still, people slept. They had to. Plowing didn't pause for insomnia. Prayer didn't wait. Neither did Vikings. Even apocalypses didn't cancel bedtime. In the 14th century, people slept through famine, war, even plague. Death carts rattling past your door, a grim alarm clock, and if you didn't wake up, some saw it as mercy. There were even records people sleeping through earthquakes, fires, and angry mobs, because sleep, somehow, found its way into chaos. Sleep deprivation was constant, and the body adapted. If you worked sunrise to sunset, ate just enough to survive, and spent your day dodging mud, taxes, and spiritual doom, you didn't fall asleep, you collapsed into it. Some used sleep as an escape from grief, illness, or the looming end of the world, forecast more often than the weather. They curled under cloaks, whispered a prayer, and let sleep carry them somewhere quieter. In the winter of 1692, the village of Salem, Massachusetts, was cloaked in more than just snow. It was cloaked in tension, suspicion, and a quiet kind of fear that seeped into the timber-framed homes and frozen fields. The people of Salem were Puritans, strict, devout, and deeply superstitious. They believed they were building a holy community in the wilderness, a city on a hill watched by God and stalked by Satan. Life was already hard. The village had recently split from Salem town over politics and religion. Crops had failed, smallpox had ravaged nearby communities. Wars with native tribes had left many traumatized. There was friction between neighbors, inheritance disputes, and a deep resentment toward outsiders, or anyone who didn't quite fit in. Add to this the long, dark, bitter New England winter, and something was bound to break. That break came in the home of Reverend Samuel Parris, the village's minister. His 9-year-old daughter, Betty, and 11-year-old niece, Abigail Williams, began to behave strangely. They screamed uncontrollably. They threw things, they contorted their bodies in unnatural ways. At times they fell silent for hours, eyes wide with terror. Neighbors whispered that they were cursed. The girls claimed they were being pinched and bitten by invisible forces. Reverend Parris, unsure of what to do, called in a local doctor, William Griggs. After failing to find any physical cause, Griggs delivered the diagnosis that would plunge the village into chaos: witchcraft. That single word set fire to the fears already simmering in Salem. In a place where witches were believed to be real, dangerous servants of the devil, the idea was not far-fetched. And now, if the devil could worm his way into the minister's own household, what did that mean for the rest of the community? The girls, prodded by both adults and peers, began naming names first. They accused women on the margins, social misfits and outcasts. But soon the accusations would reach the respectable, the wealthy, even the pious. Salem was a small village, but what was about to happen would echo far beyond its borders. What began as whispers in the dark would soon become cries from the gallows, and a legacy of paranoia that still haunts America's history books. Once the idea of witchcraft took root in Salem, it spread like ivy, quiet at first, then strangling everything it touched. The afflicted girls, Betty Parris, Abigail Williams, and soon others, like Ann Putnam Jr. and Mercy Lewis, seemed to grow bolder with each passing day. They convulsed in court, screamed during prayers, and claimed they could see dark spirits hovering over certain villages. It wasn't just childhood imagination, it was theatrical, public, and most disturbingly believed. The first to be accused were those with the least protection, women who already lived on the edges of society. Sarah Good, a homeless beggar, was known for muttering to herself when turned away from doorsteps. People claimed her mumbling was a curse. She smoked a pipe, she snapped at children. She fit the mold of a witch because she didn't fit the mold of a Puritan woman. Sarah Osborne hadn't attended church in over a year and had scandalized the community by marrying her indentured servant. After her first husband died, a woman who defied convention, clearly suspect. Tituba, the enslaved woman in Reverend Parris's household, was the most exotic of all. Originating from Barbados, her storytelling accent and folklore frightened the villagers. Under pressure, possibly even physical beatings, Tituba confessed to witchcraft, but instead of clearing the air, her confession blew it wide open. She told a story of a tall man in black, a figure associated with the devil, who asked her to sign a book. She said she saw strange animals, yellow birds, red cats, and even spectral dogs. But most damning of all, she claimed there were other witches in Salem. That was all the court needed to hear. Once Tituba opened the door, others rushed through it, new names were added. Weakly neighbors turned on neighbors. Old grudges were disguised as righteous accusations. Property disputes turned into spectral assaults. If someone's cow died suddenly, it must have been witchcraft. If a baby cried during a prayer, surely that was the devil's doing. The fear became so infectious that not even the innocent dared to speak out. To defend an accused, which was to invite suspicion upon yourself. Silence was safety, and so the web of accusations widened, trapping the village in its sticky, unseen threads. Logic was fading, hysteria was now in control. As accusations mounted and the village reached a fever pitch, the colonial government stepped in. Governor William Phipps, recently appointed and eager to maintain order,